Is that microphone recording? Good. Yes.
Okay, everyone, welcome to our planning forum. For those who don't know, my name's Chris Berry. I'm the General Manager. I'm going to be your chair this evening. We're here to discuss a particular development application for a rural residential subdivision, around about 100 and odd lots in Murrumbateman. Now, this evening's not a decision-making forum. It's an opportunity for councillors to get a better understanding of the issues and around the planning project, to get a clearer understanding. So when councillors are asked to make decisions about the development application, they'll be better informed of what community concerns are and responses and from the proponent of the project. So it's all about councillors listening, getting a better understanding of these issues. So when we come to make that decision, they're in a better position to do so. My job is, as much as anything tonight, is to simply make sure that all the fights are broken up. If we end up, that's it. But I'm not sure how we're going to do that virtually, but never mind. But certainly, look, if we can just be respectful of the presenters, give them the opportunity to have their say, and not interrupt. We do have the ability to mute people if that does become a bit of a problem. But we'll see how we go. I'm sure we'll get through this as painlessly as we possibly can. There's going to be an opportunity for people who are registered to make their presentations. I think we've got a couple of presentations from the applicant, and then about 6 from people who've made submissions. But before we go into those presentations, I'm going to call on Jeremy Knox. He's the planner looking at the assessment of the DA, to give us a bit of a quick overview of getting us up to date with where we're at with this particular proposal. So, Jeremy.
No worries. Probably just start through that first slide. No, that's Chris. That's next one. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to run through the process today briefly. The submitted application involves a 108-lot rural residential subdivision, including a proposed 106 Torrent title development lots. The application was lodged at the end of March 2020. However, recognising the then rapidly unfolding COVID-19 situation, was determined not to place the application on public exhibition until into May. Exhibition included letters to approximately 170 landowners, notice to the Murrumbateman Progress Association, the erection of notices on Council's Facebook page and website. During the public exhibition period, there were 65 submissions received. The positions, concerns and issues raised in the submissions were diverse. However, many with a high level of detail and thought, which would certainly been appreciated. The application has been referred externally to the Natural Resources Access Regulator, Water New South Wales, Environment New South Wales, and informally to Transport New South Wales. Next slide, thanks, Shrew. Come on. Yeah, that's it. So internally, the application has been referred to specialist officers within council, including development and strategic planning, engineering and assets, building, environmental health, and parks and gardens. Next slide. So following the close of the public exhibition period, a copy of the submissions were provided to the applicant so that a response could be prepared and any suggestions and concerns raised in the submissions considered. Identifying details and contacts were removed from the submissions provided to the applicant. A meeting was held with staff at Environment New South Wales on the 1st of July in relation to biodiversity values within the site and the environmental assessment report that accompanied the application. Given the level of interest and complexity of the proposal, a planning forum has been organised as an opportunity for councillors and staff to gain a better understanding of the proposal and issues raised in the submissions prior to a more detailed assessment and any determinations. So as you'd be aware, the subject land generally sits between Macintosh Circuit to the east, Isabel Drive to the south, and abuts the existing Maryville and Carrington Park estates. Next one to Shree. Just briefly, the total size of the site is approximately 97 hectares, and there's 2 different zones and corresponding minimum lot sizes under the Yass Valley Local Environmental Plan. The eastern part of the site is zoned R2 low density residential with a minimum lot size of 6,500 square metres, whilst the western part is zoned R5 large lot residential and has a minimum lot size of 1 hectare. The proposed lot sizes of the development comply with the minimum lot size requirements. Access to the subdivision is proposed through new roads from Macintosh Circuit, Isabel Drive, and with a connection to the Colonial Place. Provision for pedestrian and horse trail connection has been included from Isabel Drive to Maryville Drive. The applicant has proposed this development to consist of 3 stages. I'm going to hand back over to Chris to introduce the speakers.
All right, okay, with the presentations, but first of all, we'll hear from the applicant's consultant and the applicant. We'll time people for the first 2 presentations to 3 minutes each. We'll keep an eye on the time and give a little warning bell, just like that, when we're coming up to about 30 seconds to go. Now, I'm not going to be hard and fast about this, but we'll just see how we go. And at the end of each of these presentations, we'll allow councillors the opportunity to ask questions. So if you're prepared to answer those, that would be very, very useful. Okay, so first up we have Will Pearson from Elton Consulting to kick proceedings off.
Yeah, thank you. I might actually just hand over to Paul Powderly quickly as the developer representative, and then I'll give a more of a thorough run through of the
Will.
responses.
Thanks. Look, my name's Paul Powderly, and I'm on the call representing the owners of the land, which is Next Level 18 Proprietary Limited. It's a partnership between Shane and Adrian Quinn, Yuri Domazet and myself. The majority owners are the Quinns and the Domazettes, and the Quinns lived in Murrum Bateman in Eureka Avenue since 1978 up until 2000, and obviously they've seen a lot of change in Murrum Bateman, probably more than most of us. They came together with the Domazet family, who are one of Canberra's largest quality developers, who own the Hotel Realm Precinct in Barton, which has 5-star hotels and 4 other hotels. And the intention for the 2 of them was to deliver a high quality rural residential estate in keeping with the surrounding area. They purchased the land off Graham Shaw back in 2019, obviously set out and engaged all the consultants to ensure what was lodged with council met or exceeded the minimum requirements as set out in the zoning. Having said that, and obviously reading all the comments and submissions, we are keen to consider comments in the proposal to make sure that this is the best subdivision, and from our perspective is improved the best it can. Obviously, Will Pearson from Elton is going to take you through the responses on behalf of us and obviously try to clarify some of the concerns that have been brought up, which is important obviously to the owners. But in summary, what I can assure you on behalf of the owners that we will not be doing anything outside what is permitted in the zoning. If approval is forthcoming, we're going to deliver a very quality outcome with a substantial amount of enhanced landscaping, because you know that's important to that precinct. And as a result of our DA, we've been in discussions with New South Wales Education about a school site to go into Murrum Bateman, and obviously we're working on the commercial facilities in Murrum Bateman, because we understand that with more population there is greater need for those services. So we're very committed to that. So I'll now hand over to Will to take you through the detail.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yes, so Will Pearson, I'm the lead planner with Elton Consulting. And thank you, Jeremy, for the overview of the development. So I might just skip to to our initial response to the issues raised in the submissions, and I understand that some of the speakers will be addressing some of their concerns in more detail as well. So we've grouped them into themes in terms of the area of interest. So kicking off with in environmental, the key issues there was uncertainty about the extent of vegetation removal and concern about habitat loss and vegetation removal as well. So the biodiversity development assessment report was prepared by Ecological Australia in accordance with the state and Commonwealth legislative requirements. And as Jeremy mentioned, there was a meeting earlier this month with the New South Wales Department of Environment. The main ecological community is the white box, yellow box, Blakely's red gum woodland. And there's an overall assumed impact to be cleared of 1.18 hectares. And then that has that's mostly around the wooded area towards the centre of the site along McClungs Creek. There's also the removal of one non-hollow bearing paddock tree. This generates a requirement of 19 ecosystem credits, and we intend to achieve some of those credits with replanting within the vegetated area and through street trees through the development. In terms of services, there was a concern about water supply in terms of capacity of tanks, capacity of groundwater, and the relationship with effluent management. In terms of provision of water, all lots are proposed to be serviced by 90,000 litre rainwater tanks for potable water, supplemented by non-potable bore water. The bore water is proposed to be pumped and stored in communal tanks, and there were a few comments about using open dams. This wasn't considered suitable due to evaporation loss. It was just considered an unsustainable management option. The rainwater tanks are considered sufficient to manage the runoff from roofs, and there's additional infrastructure includes lineal swales to direct runoff within road reserves. And in terms of the effluent management and groundwater impact, this was assessed with the land capability assessment report by Soil, Land and Water, and SMEC, our engineers, also prepared the stormwater report. In terms of traffic, SMEC again prepared a traffic report. The proposal is not considered to be a traffic generating activity. SMEC have, in their traffic report, determined that the proposed development will not have a significant impact on surrounding development, and it is within the limits for the average annual daily traffic counts based on, movement generation, based on council's road hierarchy plan. There was comments about the movement of traffic between Canberra and Yass, and SMEC have received some additional information, and they've updated the traffic report to reflect that the majority of traffic will move south to Canberra, and then only a minor amount, it's about 95% is expected to go to Canberra and 5% is expected to go to Yass. In terms of the amenity and social infrastructure, concerns were raised about the impact to Murrumbidgee in terms of a stress on local services, and a concern about lack of open space for the proposed community. As Paul mentioned, we expect that the proposal will have a positive economic impact on Murrumbidgee, and will encourage economic development. There's already a new neighbourhood shop proposed near the Fairlight subdivision to the north of the village. And as Paul mentioned as well, the Department of Planning is seeking currently a school site for a new primary school. In terms of open space, part of lot 208 in the subdivision is intended to be developed as a common landscape area, and we're also discussing with council opportunities to potentially increase the public open space along McClung's Creek. So as Paul said, we have looked through and we've read all of the comments and the submissions, and we thank everyone for their interest in this development application, and we look forward to working closely with council following the planning forum and the receipt of comments as Jeremy mentioned, all the referral agencies externally and internally to address any potential further information requests and really just deliver a positive development for Murrum Bateman. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Will and Paul. Councillors, any questions of our two proponents at this point in time?
And sorry, I should mention that we do have some of the other specialists standing by as well for technical questions, some of the report authors. If there are technical questions, I think we've got Pete Evans from SMEC, Mike Stapleton from Veris, who's the surveyor, and Michelle, Michelle and John Michelle from Ecological, and John Franklin from Soil, Land, Water.
Councillors, Councillor Frost.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of those things, and I'm sure some of the other people might tease this about a bit more. The 90,000 litres for rainwater, and then you're supplementing it by bores. Have you got permission from the state government for those bores, and what is it like in terms of quality for that supplementary water?
So I might answer that question if that's okay. Will, we obviously have approval and we have a letter from New South Wales Water because the bore exists on the property. So at this stage that exists. We've looked at where we could put down a second bore that didn't interfere, and we've done some work in terms of distancing and had that signed off by the consultants. We will be doing a test. Obviously it'd be premature to be out there drilling bores until we had support from council that the development would proceed, but obviously that'll be a critical test to do. The current bore is more than adequate, but we'll want to do those tests and put down the second bore to make sure that there is sufficient water.
2 bores for 108 does seem odd. For 108 different lots is seems to be spread fairly thin, I would have thought. But
and it is only it's non-potable water that we intend to use the bores for. So supplementary. And I don't know if John or Pete, you want to add anything more?
Yeah, it's Peter Evans here from SMEC. The 90,000 litres is for your domestic water supply, basically for your roof runoff and your garage runoff. So that's your potable water supply. The bore will only be doing non-potable as a supplementary supply for external uses, maybe for horse troughs, horses, things like that. I actually live in a rural residential place at Womboyne, and I've got a 90,000 litre tank. And I've only ever had to buy water once in my 12 years here with 90,000 litres.
I guess my experience is a bit the same, but a bit different. I also live in an area like that where we're relying on 90,000 litres and then a bore to supplement. And when we started to get a lot of neighbours, we got a few more bores, and the bore essentially just went away. So we've had to make our other arrangements. So it doesn't always work out well. Can I ask another question quickly about the school?
Yes.
Are you looking to start the development and have people in there before the school's up, or have you spoken to the Department of Education about timing?
So yes, the Department of Education has approached Colliers International. We are finding at the moment 5 school sites in the region, one in Murrum Bateman, one in Cooma, one in Bungendore. They're actually looking at a whole rollout. So at the moment, it's a process to look at what sites are available, so they then can obviously go down the process of procuring. I would expect that a school, the procurement of the site and construction would be probably a couple of years in total. This development, subject to getting planning approval, we'd probably be in a position to have first blocks in sort of 8 to 10 months after approval. So there'll be a bit of, and then people build homes. So I suspect that it'll come on stream reasonably, maybe similar or 3 to 4 months different. But the whole idea is once this development application went in, I think everyone realised that Murray Boatman is now going to be in need of that education facility.
Probably was a little bit remiss of me at the start for not mentioning that council's been advocating for a school for some years now. The community probably for a little bit longer than council, but we understand that the government are going through an expression of interest process for us to establish a site. And just to let everyone know, council has submitted an expression of interest for land that it owns on the Hawthorn property. So we've put an application in to try and facilitate the development of a school for the Murray Bateman area. So apologies for not saying that up front, but that's certainly where we're at as a council at this moment in time. Councillors, any other questions? Rowena, did I see your hand up?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting. Just a quick one in relation to the water, the potable water used for horses, but I assume also gardens and things. Is that the intent, or gardens are to be in recyclable? Sorry, Peter.
Yes, Rowena. The non-potable water would be for gardens and outside the house, basically. The roof water would be for domestic use inside the house. So non-potable water, the bore water, would be used outside the house. Watering trees, horses, a whole heap of things like that.
Yep. Okay, so not necessarily watering their whole blocks. Will there be limitations on the water use? That's all.
Yeah, look, this is a little bit to be worked out going forward. The bore yields about 15 litres per second at the moment, so it's a very good bore. I would expect it to be metered for each block, and there'd be an agreement drawn up for a usage per block. And I think that would probably be the way to manage it. Paul might be able to expand on that.
Yes, certainly that's their goal, is to have the most sustainable process in place. And I don't think just having people willy-nilly, watering 6,000 metre blocks is not going to be the right say. So there is going to be certainly a reticulated bore system with meters. And as I said, when we get to that stage, the certificates will have a minimum requirement of 90,000 litres. So just not 90,000. Some people would put in larger tanks, but it certainly is a minimum of 90,000, and we'd be wanting to restrict in the water because obviously there needs to be enough to go around.
It's John Franklin here. The only other thing to consider in terms of non-potable water requirements per lot is each lot will be disposing of effluent on site, which essentially, because we're stipulating high quality aerated wastewater treatment systems, there'll be an additional amount of water available out of that on-site effluent disposal and treatment process for each of those lots as well. So that's in the order of 219 kilolitres per lot per year based on a 5-bedroom house. So it's not a insignificant amount of water, additional non-potable water that's available to each lot through that process.
And Rowena, it's Peter Evans again. Look, I live out at Womboyne, and that's how we water all our trees out here, out of our recycled water out of a septic system, and we pipe our water around the property and water our trees, and it works fantastically.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, probably John aimed at this one. From a quick look at the map, this is going to be in the catchment of a large community dam that's used off Lakeview Drive there. What's going to be the impact of this on the quality of the runoff water from there into that community dam?
all of the effluent disposal practices that we proposed in the report for the subdivision, all the on-site stuff complies with the standard or council's requirements and the Australian standard for on-site effluent disposal. And all those standards are obviously based around the effluent disposal practices on each of the individual lots not having an impact off-site, so off-site of that lot. So if that's the sort of approach we're taking, so you can consider that there won't be an off-site impact associated with the whole development, because there won't be an off-site impact associated with on-site effluent disposal on any of the individual lots.
Any other questions, councillors? No? Okay, well, we'll move on to the submitters, and I believe each of the submitters have got around about 6 minutes or thereabouts for their presentation. The first one I have on my list here is Kenneth Beaton. Is Kenneth there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for the opportunity of being first. Is there any opportunity to share my screen, or is that not feasible?
Yes, there is an opportunity. Apologies in advance if we get the technology wrong.
Yeah, I haven't used Zoom for this before, but I've used other tools. I'm making this presentation on my own behalf with a bit of input from my wife. I border the development at the northwest tip of the subdivision, so top left. Given that this is a development that's going to increase the Murrum Bateman population by about 10% and the local area by about 20%, I am very keen that it's done properly. I was encouraged to hear Will talk about quality of the development. I'm less keen to hear him say that it meets the minimum standards. The minimum standards are not what I regard as a quality development. So it's important that we do get this right. In general, there are a number of issues that I'm a bit concerned about in the development of approval and application and the documents that came with it. They may have been addressed by the updates from the applicants, but I don't know. First thing that I noticed was the tree lines around the top left-hand corner, the northwest, are simply missing from all the plans. They talk about a lot of trees that are there and being preserved, but these ones here, as shown on Google Maps, are simply not in any of the plans. I think they ought to be preserved. The traffic impact assessment has a number of errors that really concerned me. It talked about 100 lots rather than 106. Ellerton Street is in Bungendore. I don't know where that came into this proposal. I did hear Will, I think, talk about the fact that they've changed the assessment from 50-50 Murrum Bateman to 95% to Canberra. I would have put it at about 75% to Canberra, but I think that will make it more important. I had a bit of concern about the methodology used to generate the number of trips. They're based on the RMS Guide to Traffic Generating Developments. That's great, but the guide also talks about having perhaps a larger number, especially in larger areas where there's opportunities for dual occupancy development. I think the block sizes we're looking at here do have that opportunity for dual occupancy development later on. What I'm much more concerned about is what's missing in the traffic assessment. The real problems are going to be the intersections with the Barton Highway. I've had one son in an accident there recently. The load on the traffic there, especially at the peak periods, can be quite significant. The Statement of Environmental Effects acknowledges that there's long-standing congestion and safety concerns. We'll be increasing the traffic through that intersection by about 20%. And that's really where the key issue is going to be in any congestion. The blocks leading on to McIntosh Circuit have a potential for just running into traffic and causing accidents, but the real issue will be at the Barton Highway intersection. Nowhere did we have a look at the impact on public transport. There are some commuter services going through Murray-Bateman. Is this going to generate more traffic users? Is that going to cause a problem? But in particular, school students, there are a number of school buses that go along the area. I don't know whether the road sizes are sufficient for buses to travel within the new development. There doesn't seem to be any place along Isabel Drive where the students could hop on or off the buses safely. That's a bit of a concern. Environmentally, the fact that the developers put forward the scope for having a future path going along from Isabel to McIntosh Circuit, it's really great. I'm worried that this could be made better. At the moment, we've got lot 180, which is the main source of all the tree clearing. We've got lot 207, which is a fairly strange shaped lot and with easements for the water and that sort of thing. In my humble opinion, it could certainly be, the overall quality of the development could be made a lot better by simply leaving lot 180 and 207 as open space, joining onto 208 or whatever. Lot 180 at the moment has a tree clearance. Given its proximity to the creek, there's a very limited capacity for effluent disposal. And lot 207, if it could be gone, then the path would be straight rather than having a strange dogleg around. You could squeeze up this access path between 206 and I think the one above it, 205. There are a number of other things in my comments, but those are the key ones that I thought I'd like to bring to the council's attention. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Kenneth. Your presentation came up very clear at this end. It was very useful to follow. So thanks very much for that. Councillors, any questions of Kenneth?
I was just going to say, I think he's raised some good points, and I hope that some of those things maybe are taken into account before final review comes through to council, final decision-making time for council. Don't mean that I agree or disagree with any of them particularly, but I think there's a couple of relevant points there that are worth taking into consideration anyway. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, let's move now to Deb Fleming. Deb,
hello. Well, unlike Kenneth, I don't have a fancy presentation for you. I'm very impressed, Kenneth, but you're a hard act to follow. Look, I think that I'd like to support a lot of what Kenneth had to say. My concerns, I guess, around the development relate to it maintaining the existing nature of Murray-Bateman, which is something that is referenced. And in order to do that, I believe that it needs to be horse, push bike, pedestrian, and family friendly. And I believe that at the moment it's sort of lacking in a few areas in order to achieve that end goal. And also, like Kenneth, I was really happy to hear Will say that and Paul say that they're really keen to do a quality development. And the other thing, which also harks back to what Kenneth said, is that in terms of preserving our wildlife, I think it's really important that we keep all of the trees wherever possible, and also that we have strong linkages between those areas of green space within the development. So I would like to see the paths widened, because once again, when you've got horses on a 6,500 square metre block and another horse goes behind on that path, they, you know, rush over to say hello, or they want to make a new friend. And so those paths need to be wide enough to allow for the people traversing them to actually have a bit of space, to stay away from the dog that's launching itself at the fence, or the alpaca that's guarding its sheep, or the other numerous things that we're probably all very aware that happen in Murrum Bateman. And when you've got your kid on a push bike and a big dog or a horse comes running up, you know, it's nice to have a bit of a safety factor, I guess, a bit of a not feeling like you're in a very confined space. And I think also keeping those a bit wider then allows for the wildlife corridors to be protected and connected. So in short, what I would like to see happen is I'd like to see the paths widened and the road verges widened. If you look at Maryville Estate, the road verges there are much wider than in some other areas. And while I didn't get out there with a tape measure, they're a lot wider than 20 metres. I'd like to see connected green space corridors throughout that would allow for the wildlife and would also allow for the residents to be connected, have a connected green space, but also would connect to other areas in Murrum Bateman. I'd like to see all treed areas preserved. And yes, the traffic control, I also believe, is a problem, particularly for residents of Macintosh Circuit, because you're turning it into it's going to become even more of a highway than it already is. That's probably all I've got to say.
Thanks for that, Deb. Very effective, regardless of the fact that you didn't have your PowerPoint up, but that's all good. Councillors, any questions for our last speaker? No? Okay. Clearly got your point across there. I think everyone understands where you're coming from. So thank you very much for that, Deb.
Thank you.
Next, I think I've got David Herald from the Maryville Community Association, but he might be coming in from the Antarctic, I think. If you just would like to unmute yourself there, David.
Yes, it was fortunate we managed to get down there before COVID-19 struck. There's me speaking, and then George Brennan, who's sitting next to me, which you can't see just yet. We're splitting up our talks between the two of us, so hopefully we can transition quite quickly.
Thanks, David.
I think a first point we want to make is, as a very large, well, one of the largest states.
Introduce you representing Maryville.
Yes, we are representing Maryville Estate, and I've got 3 members of the executive committee with me. We are one of the larger estates in the area. In that context, we find that we neither object to the development nor support the development. We take a neutral position. However, more broadly, we believe that there are a range of issues in the development application which could be changed to improve the overall development and create the great development that the developer has indicated. On the particular issues, there is a major issue for us. I'd put it as a major issue. On the southwest corner of the development, we have a situation where the existing fence line departs rather rapidly, has a huge deviation from the legal boundary. When you put the, if you were to put a fence line where the legal boundary is, that would cross a gully and associated riparian corridor. Now, the development application doesn't refer to that gully or riparian corridor, but it is there. We note from the development plans that there seems to be a proposal for some sort of pathway along that fence line, which goes all the way down to Isabella Drive. I think the width of it from memory is proposed to be about 8 metres, which is a pretty wide path. That path is going to result in removal of a huge amount of vegetation, particularly at the southernmost end, where virtually all the vegetation down there, trees that have been there for quite a few years, will have to be bulldozed to create a path. And we are concerned about the appropriateness of that. It's a lot of land to use, to clear trees off. Now, given the issues in that area, what we would like to have is an on-site meeting with the developers and with somebody from council to actually go through the range of issues with along that part of the adjoining intersection between Maryville Estate and the proposed development. I should add in this context that Maryville Estate has a large length of fence line in common with the proposed development, so we have a particular interest. In this area, the southwest corner, it's over 1.5 kilometres long, where we have issues with the boundary location. Now, one of the other issues that we have is the development application refers to a diversion of the McClung's Creek at the southwest corner down near Isabella Drive. What concerns us is for any water coming down from the hill there and diversions for the creek, it might look all and well in that area, but further down where McClung's Creek crosses Maryville Drive, there are several lots there which are subject to flooding. And the last thing we want to do is to have a situation with the various developments which increases the risk of flooding for the houses, the lots at the far end of McClung's Creek, which are already subject to flooding. So in all of that, part of the problem is we don't know what the proposal is for the diversion at the southern end of McClung's Creek, and we'd like to know more about what is actually involved in that, because clearly my understanding of the law is you can't divert water flows without the agreement of the neighbour. Now, finally, from my point of view, we are concerned about the extent of vegetation removal, and we urge council to protect plantings from the last 15 years in particular. There's a raft of trees planted around the edge of the area of the development, which had been planted some years ago as part of Greening Australia and some other government program. And they've developed nicely and they're providing great habitat, and we would not want to see those be removed. In respect of the box and the other trees which are suggested to be removed, and I think will indicate there would only be 1.5 acres or hectares of removal. The application refers to these trees as being endangered, but not being critically endangered. Now, the ACT, which isn't all that far away, those trees are actually classified as critically endangered, which really means you shouldn't be knocking them down. And one of the problems of justifying removal on the basis of them only being endangered and not critically endangered is by removing more and more endangered trees, you inevitably turn them into critically endangered. And we don't think we should be doing any significant removal of those trees. Remove enough to allow the road to go through, but no more. Now I'll hand over to George Brenner.
Thanks, David.
Oh, goodness me, we have got Antarctica, haven't we?
You're zipping in and out there.
Let's turn that around a bit.
Better? Cool. Yeah, I think that's
I'll
fine.
get out of
So, I'm speaking in a way to finish off some Berryville Estate comments and my own, and a couple of things from my own submission. I'll sort of put two together to save time. The comment was made earlier about the dam reduction. From our point of view, that wasn't so much about use as non-potable water, although it potentially could be. But if what we're doing is taking away all the surface water management, other than the new roofs going in, which obviously is reasonably significant, effectively what we do is we reduce environmental opportunities, we reduce habitat, wildlife opportunities, and we know from living here that the dams around the place are used a lot by local species, and we also increase overflow into McClung's Creek, which already doesn't cope some of the time, and we've just been talking about that briefly. And we live right next door, and we can say that a 90,000 tank will not capture all the rainfall. It simply won't. Nor, in fact, will it end up being entirely adequate. This last summer, there was a 3-week delay to a 4-week delay for people seeking potable water for their houses in this community. Like if you phoned up, that was the wait you had. As someone who ran out of water and was told to wait 4 weeks, that was where I was at, and I was not alone. A lot of people were in that position. And I'm sure councillors have heard it wherever they've gone to anything. So we really think it goes back to that point about what is a quality development. And from our perspective, a quality development doesn't just look to minimum standards. It looks to what is going to work in the long term for the community. And a number of the comments we're making are really going to that point. And I think there are opportunities to do things which don't adversely affect the development for the most part and improve its quality. And one of them is simply to say, well, the minimum might be 90, but we're going to put a covenant saying, say, 120. I'm not sure what number should be used. But it's the type of thinking that I think we'd like to encourage the developer to do. In terms of the bore water, based on typical usage on our estate, you're probably going to need to be able to allocate 21,000 kilolitres to 106 lots. And at that, you'll have people overusing, people underusing, and people screaming regularly. But that's our experience of what would come out of that bore. And I think at the moment, from the discussion we heard before, it doesn't sound to me like we actually know whether the bore can sustain that without impacts elsewhere in the village area where other people are presumably relying on the same aquifer. I think it's an area that does need some more thinking and evidencing as to what the impact of that additional drain on the local resource is likely to be. It's not to say it can't go ahead, but it's like at the moment it just sounds very unscoped, and it looks like she'll be right, and it shouldn't have that. the other aspect of the dam, I think I mentioned this, but just in case I didn't, because was the potential flooding effects from removal of surface water. When you look, at the northern end of the estate, what we're really doing here is tidying up the creek bed, creating all these individual lots with very little catchment beyond people's roofs. And then everything was just going to be diverted into McClung's Creek in a way that it hasn't been probably for the last century. Well, it'll be interesting to see what that does, but it doesn't seem like that's really been fully modelled. And so that's an area where we think some more thought should be given. We were left wondering about the management arrangements that are proposed. It seems to be entirely a freehold development, and that raises issues around how we manage areas like McClung's Creek and environmental lots. If there is no management structure for managing them, how are they managed? And how do we work together? If we want to work cooperatively with our neighbours next door to think about how we landscape and manage, does that mean we're negotiating with individual lot owners? Is there no structure that we're working with? That just seems a bit incoherent from our point of view. We think, again, it's one of those things where a quality development might think more about that and see what could be done. More generally, we think the environmental lots that are there are fairly limited, and with a 100-lot estate, there's really a question about, in a quality development, what is the development creating by way of community infrastructure? It's creating economic opportunity. No one's going to argue with that, and that point was well made. But what community infrastructure is being supported or encouraged, and how is the social environment? It could be another urban transit zone where people never see each other because they've got large lots and they just disappear and they don't get to intermingle and create a community. And I suppose, a bit like the comments about wildlife corridors earlier, we'd like to encourage the proponents to think about how their development will enhance community as well as economic opportunity. I don't think I need to repeat the comments on the traffic report. So that's in relation to the Maryville Community Association. From my own personal point of view, I share many of the concerns that have been raised before in this meeting around the environmental management and the traffic management, and I won't repeat them because I thought Kenneth wasn't going to speak, so I thought I'd better, but he's spoken very eloquently, so I can leave that. And then I wonder about the infrastructure side of things. And there are sort of bland statements in the proposal about the NBN will be okay and the power situation will be okay. And I wonder how true that really is. I mean, certainly in the existing Murrumbateman village, NBN's been here for 12 months and it's not reliable and it's not coping. Where I am on Maryville Estate, it's also not awesome. Some people have a lot of trouble no matter what provider they're with. Some people are doing okay, but I think, here we are with a legislated guarantee about what NBN's providing. Well, everyone who lives in Murrumbateman knows that it's not being delivered at the moment. So if we add another 108 lots into it, 106 lots into it, what's that going to do? And it would be nice to have some assurance around that. And I'm hoping council's planning processes deal with that issue. The other thing that was on my mind particularly was the public transport, and I think that's been well addressed, so I won't take any more time.
Thanks, George and David. Councillors, any questions of our two presenters from the Maryville Community Association?
No, thanks, Chris.
Okay, good. All right. Again, thank you, gentlemen. Very clear presentation of the concerns from your perspective, so well done. Adrian Brocklehurst is the next person. Is Adrian with us?
Yeah, thanks for that.
You're on mute there, Adrian, I think.
Is that right?
That's better. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I'm here with Sarah.
We've lost you again.
Sorry?
We've lost you again. I'm not sure what's happening there, but you keep fading in and out.
That's probably
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. That might be the NBN we're talking about. Yeah, so Sarah and I live just off Macintosh. I'd also sort of note that I guess quite a number of the things that we're concerned about and raised in our submissions have already been covered off by people, I think. So there's quite, in a sense, there's quite a common group of concerns, I guess, which would be good for council to consider. One of the things too, which touches on what people have talked about with infrastructure, and is the sheer size of this development. This isn't a few blocks going up in a vacant area of Murrum Bateman. This is a large development which is basically filling in large green space between the newer estates and the older village. So this is actually changing the character of the village. Not it's not just another development, I think personally, because of where it's filling in. It's really creating just one very large town now. And with that will come, and it's been talked about, the character, I guess, and the general infrastructure issues. But with that, some of our concerns are things like this will be a significant group of vehicles and transport. And so there's a lot of children use Macintosh in terms of commuting for schools and so forth. They're all standing down there, and the bus stops and things have been done up, which is great in terms of council. But this is clearly going to increase traffic, and I think significantly. I mean, the report talked about something like 90 extra trips a day, but if you've got over 100 houses, we have 7 cars between our 2 blocks. So if you've got over 100 cars, I don't think it's going to be 90 odd trips a day. Most people are going to Canberra, and I'm happy to see that was corrected in the report, because that really stood out as sort of having 50% go one way or the other. So obviously there's been a rethink after proposals have been put in, submissions have been put in. Yeah, most people will be heading towards Canberra. There'll be a lot of traffic. This development, because of the size, there'll be a lot of heavy traffic, and then followed by presumably more buses and things like that. So our question mark really is about both the safety for the children on the roads, because those roads are regularly under repair. Anyone that uses Macintosh knows that it's perpetually being repaired. So probably some serious thinking about what else can be done with a lot more heavy vehicles travelling on it would be very useful. And then I'd also agree with Kenneth talking about the real standout will be the entry onto the Barton Highway, as well as just in terms of driving down Macintosh. But the Barton Highway, we've all seen accidents. I've seen accidents with the new intersection, not the old one. The old one, I almost saw a school bus wiped out, but the new one, we had an accident not long ago. So it's just, there is going to be that volume increase, which needs to be, and I know that officially the roads will take that according to the specifications set out in the development, but I think it's going to be significantly more, and we do significantly more than what seems to be being proposed. I guess another thing, just in terms of how the traffic's going to move, is the entrance off Macintosh into this new estate is literally at the bottom of a hill. You come over the top of it, you can't actually see anything until you come over that top, for the people that know Macintosh. And if that plan is correct and the entrance is going to be literally at the bottom of the hill there, then that'll be an interesting scenario in itself, I think, unless there's some sort of safety mechanism on the road or something to slow people up, because that's basically out of sight for people when they come over there. There's also the environmental things. Again, most of these have all been touched on by people, but we sort of reinforce the concerns about the vegetation that's being taken out, about the lack of green corridor in terms of, well, the sheer size of this takes away what is a corridor for animals in this area. And also the dams. The dams is a real concern, and that's already been raised as well, about having open dams, because they are a focal point for wildlife in the area. So, and also the water table. I mean, that's, again, I'd just express what other people have expressed. There seems to be more question marks about what it actually means than people being very clear about how much is going to be drawn out and what that'll do for the local water table, which is already under pressure. And again, I just agree with the people talking about the tanks. I mean, we all have had tankers coming in. So if you've only had one tanker, you've been a very, very lucky block, I can tell you, last drought, because we've all had piles of tankers with a huge waiting, and that'll just be exacerbated with another 100 blocks. But overall, similar concerns, I guess, that other people have raised about infrastructure, about safety, and about vegetation and environment. Sarah?
Yeah.
Yep. So that's really for us.
Adrian,
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Councillors, any questions of Adrian?
I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment. That seems to be the similar themes of concern are coming through from everybody. So obviously it's just good feedback from the proposal and the proponents to actually sort of take into account taking it forward.
Thanks, Rowena. Any other councillor comments at this stage? Okay, thanks. Okay, well, our final presenters are Natalie and Adam Cooper. Are they with us this evening? No, I don't. Wait, it looks like we don't have Natalie or Adam with us this evening, so we'll keep moving. I'd just like to call on Jeremy now, just to give a bit of an overview of what the next steps in the planning process are with this particular proposal. So, Jeremy, if you can.
Just bring up that PowerPoint again. Yeah.
The technical difficulty sorted out? No?
Yeah, fantastic. So the next steps from here for the assessment of the application will generally be as follows. So firstly, a detailed review of the submissions received and consideration of the representations that have been made here tonight at the Planning Forum. An additional information request will be finalised and further discussions held with the applicant as necessary. Outstanding referrals will be received, the comments reviewed. At the point of all additional information and referrals being received, the assessment will be finalised by planning staff and a report prepared for consideration to council. The assessment report will address all relevant issues raised in the submissions. Everyone who made a submission will be advised of the council meeting date and time, and will have the opportunity again to address council during the open forum before the meeting if desired. Everyone who made a submission will also be advised of any decision by council. In the interim, periodic updates will also be provided on the status of the assessment as we work through it.
Just to add to that, Jeremy, just to point out, for an open forum at a council meeting, there is a limit on the number of speakers that we do have. And obviously that's one of the reasons why we have these planning forums is to ensure that all the people that do want to have an opportunity to have a say can do so outside the limitations of a council meeting. So when we get to that point, we'll certainly provide some more information. It might be worth, Jeremy, just mentioning, obviously if we have further discussions with the applicant and adjustments are made as a result of some of the representations that are made tonight and in the submissions, what happens with that? Do the people who've made submissions get the opportunity to review that again?
Potentially, I suppose it'll just depend on the extent of what's changed. Potentially, if it's directly addressing, I suppose, the concerns that have been raised in the submissions, we may not. So yeah, it'll just depend on what people are doing, what changes are made as to whether it goes back out to notification and execution again. But again, we'll keep everyone updated as we work through that process.
But important that if we do that, we just need to make sure that people get the opportunity to have their say on those adjustments. And I presume that would go for the revised traffic management information. That's okay. All right. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about any of those next steps before we wrap up for the evening?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
In my presentation, I referred to, from our perspective, the need to have an on-site meeting with the developer, with somebody from council being present, because of the problems with the boundary interface between Maryville Estate and the development. And it would be useful if we could have some indication of, at this stage, of whether that is a likely possibility.
So I can jump in on behalf of the owners. We'd certainly be very keen to do that. As I said, I think there was one bit of information. We actually redid the fence some months ago, so I was just a bit concerned that you said the fence was in the wrong place. But let's get on site for sure with council and yourself and make sure we've got everyone happy and clear, because the one thing that I did put in our 88B is to be no removal of any of that vegetation along your boundary and along that zone. So I'm very keen to make sure you're comfortable that we're covering off that, the way in which we're going to deal with the diversion, and also that the fencing is now in the right place, because obviously there was money spent only some months ago to fix that fencing. So let's do that, and I'm happy to do that as soon as council can arrange it.
This is George. That's great. I won't go into too much detail, but the part of the old fence which wasn't rectified, the rectified fence is accurate, but the bit of the fence that wasn't rectified is out by up to 20 metres.
Okay.
So
Okay, well, let's get together and sort it. So
Yeah,
I'm very happy through council to get out there in the next 4 or 5 days to make sure that you're comfortable and we can have a conversation about those things.
All right. Okay, no problems. We'll get Jeremy to set that up to have a quick meeting on site on some of those more specific issues. So yeah, no problems.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the next steps? No? Okay. Look, can I just thank everybody for the way you've conducted yourselves tonight? Made my life very easy at this end. I know this is a bit of a new territory for all of us, working with these virtual forums rather than having people meet in a council chamber or a community hall or the like. So, look, really appreciate the presentations tonight. I think everyone was very clear. And councillors, thanks for your attendance and questioning in regards to the submissions. Hopefully you've got a bit more of a clear understanding of some of the issues and challenges that we're facing as part of this particular project. So with that, everyone, thank you for your participation this evening. And we will keep you up to date with, as Jeremy's indicated, with the next steps in the process, and we'll try and keep you informed with as much notice as we possibly can about when this will be coming before the councillors for a final decision. So thank you on behalf of everyone tonight.
Appreciate it.
Close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.